Yeah, it was actually something that I always wanted to try, and I never had the guts to do it. And I found myself before my acting career was going, and I was working at a bar, and there were some comedians that were sitting at it, and they were just joking around back and forth. And this was a bar above a place called Yuck Yucks in Vancouver, where it used to be anyway. And they were telling me about how to get into it. And my birthday was coming up, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. So I got some friends together, and I got together a 5-minute set. And I went down to Yuck Yucks, and I showed up to go do stand-up comedy. And the person that runs the room was like, hey, listen, you don't just show up. And like, you gotta call us. You got to make a date and a plan. You got to put a set together. I'm like, well, I have like 20 people with me, and I have a set. So, and they were like, all right. And then I'm going, the guy who's like running the night, he's like, so you've never done it before? I'm like, no, never. He's like, okay, well, you're probably going to suck. Just try not to run off a stage. I'm like, okay.
Well, I want to welcome you to another episode of Media from the Heart. My name is Ruth Hill, and I'm your host today. And every day. But I want to introduce you to a very special guest of mine, Jesse Arthur Carroll. Now, he's one of those people, maybe you're saying, I've never seen him. I've never heard of him. Maybe you haven't, but I want you to pay particular attention to this particular podcast. Because if you like Hallmark movies, or Lifetime movies, or Up movies, or even some network stuff, and some streaming stuff, I bet you've seen him and you didn't even realize it. I got the chance to interview Jesse several years ago, and now he is really out there making a name for himself. It was so exciting to finally meet him virtually. He is such a joy, so much fun. You're going to learn about his early life and what he's doing now, and probably just a little bit about everything in between. So without further ado, I present to you the amazing, the fantastic, the unbelievably gifted Jesse Arthur Carroll. I want to welcome you to another episode of Media from the Heart. My name is Ruth Hill, and I have a fantastic guest today. I've actually had the chance to interview him before, and now he's on my podcast, Jesse Arthur Carroll. So nice to meet you.
You too.
I mean, I know we've kind of talked back and forth, but it's our first time actually having a real conversation like this. So thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. And so for those who may wonder, well, who is Jesse? I don't recognize him. Well, you might not know his name, but I have a feeling you're going to find out you actually have seen him and or heard him. So let me just introduce Jesse just a little bit here. With over 500 voiceover credits and being nominated for 3 One Voice Awards, Jesse Arthur Carroll is one of the fastest rising talents in the voiceover industry. He's had lots of high-profile clients. He is in demand. He is also the narrator for Backroad Truckers, currently streaming on Hulu, with the second season to air on Canada's History Channel. Now, interestingly enough, we go back in time a bit here with Jesse. He was born on Vancouver Island, and then he moved to Vernon, BC at the age of 18. Then he moved to Vancouver in his 20s. He was a stand-up comedian for a decade, which included touring Australia, 2015 and 2016, where he performed at several different venues, and also in New Zealand. He now resides and works in both New York City and Vancouver, and is focusing on his acting and voiceover career. So I didn't even know about the stand-up comedian part until I read that. I don't know. I asked you about that, so that was kind of cool.
Sure.
The first role Jesse booked was on the TV series Travelers, starring Eric McCormack. That's an amazing series. If you have not looked it up, be sure to check it out because it is on Netflix. Jesse has become a favorite, booking a number of lead and critical roles in Hallmark movies that include A Summer Romance, Haley Dean Mystery, Christmas on Holly Lane, and Christmas Pen Pals. Jesse is also in the role of August McGrath in the series The Imperfects, now streaming on Netflix. All right, so that is by way of introduction. If you have not heard of Jesse, there's a good chance you've heard his voice, or you've seen him act and you just didn't realize, oh, that's Jesse Arthur Carroll. There you go. Well, you have now, of course, that's just a background. I mean, there's a lot more that we can get into here because I know you've got some exciting stuff going on right now.
Yeah.
For sure. I didn't even talk about that because I wanted to be sure that we cover that in the interview. But since you and I first had our interview back a few years back, that was when you were in, I'd forgotten you were in like 3 Christmas movies that year.
Yeah.
I was just like, whoa. I was like, I forgot that you were in all those. And I was rereading my interview. I was like, oh, that's right. He did that. He was like Hallmark and Lifetime and Up. And it was just really something that you were doing all that. So stand-up comedian part. I never asked you about that. So how did that part of your life, how did that part of your career happen? How did you get started with that?
Yeah, it was actually something that I always wanted to try, and I never had the guts to do it. And I found myself before my acting career was going, and I was working at a bar, and there were some comedians that were sitting at it, and they were just joking around back and forth. And this was a bar above a place called Yuck Yucks in Vancouver, where it used to be anyway. And they were telling me about how to get into it. And my birthday was coming up, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. So I got some friends together, and I got together a 5-minute set, and I went down to Yuck Yucks, and I showed up to go do stand-up comedy. And the person that runs the room was like, hey, listen, you don't just show up, and like, you gotta call us, you gotta make a date and a plan, you gotta put a set together. I'm like, well, I have like 20 people with me and I have a set. So, and they were like, all right. And then I'm going, the guy who was like running the night, he's like, so you've never done it before? I'm like, no, never. He's like, okay, well, you're probably gonna suck. Just try not to run off a stage. I'm like, okay. So I get to the back of the green room. The green room is right behind the stage, and there's curtains, so like you can hear what's going on just on the other side of the curtains. And I was pretty nervous, and all the other comics were kind of giving me a ribbing. It's sort of what they do when it's your first time, and they're like, you're definitely gonna bomb. And I went on stage. I remember I tried to grab the microphone to start. I was gonna pull it out so I could walk on stage. I couldn't get the microphone out of the stand, so I picked up the whole stand like a weirdo and walked around on stage telling my jokes. It actually went pretty good. So, and then I continued doing it for another 10 years until after I toured Australia a couple of times. It got a real taste of what being a professional stand-up comedian is, making your living that way. And I found it wasn't for me. So then I really wanted to get back into acting. And at this time, Netflix and streaming services were really blowing up, and there was so much more work to be had than when I originally wanted to get into acting. So I got myself an agent, got back into it, and then I started booking in Hallmark and Travelers and stuff, and the rest is history. Now I'm in New York.
Wow. That's really something. Actually, Timmy, one of my audience members, just said, very much like Freddie Mercury, is what she said.
Oh, really?
She said that.
Did you do comedy?
Well, I think just because you were just that you hadn't done it and you just got up and did it. Like,
yeah, totally. Well, that's kind of my philosophy with everything. You know what I mean? You got one life to live. If you really want to do something, just start, just try it. I think so many people waste so much time trying to think about how to get started. It really, how you learn how to do it is in the experience of just throwing yourself into it and just be willing to fail and then cry and then do it again.
That's key. Being willing to fail too. Yeah. People, in fact, some people will say, just really get in and fail. Like if you're going to fail, really fail. Like,
yeah, fail big.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Because sometimes you don't.
It's true. Very true. Yeah, Timmy was meaning, I think, with the microphone. I guess the way that you picked up the microphone, because that was like Freddie Mercury would take instead of holding the mic.
Right. Yeah. Carrying the mic.
That's what she was meaning. I wasn't even sure, so I'm glad she clarified. But
I wonder if that started because he couldn't get the mic out of the stand. It's harder than you think. You got to twist it and pull. But anyway. I did feel cool walking around with it.
Yeah, I can identify once. Actually, when you were telling that story, I was remembering back when I was in high school once, and I was going to sing a solo, and I could not find the mic. I was actually going to just like sing without the mic, and there's this whole video, and I remember watching the video back, like, oh, I look so lost, and I just
was it all the lights?
It was hidden, and I didn't know. It was like down on the ground somewhere, and so nobody told me where it was. So you see me walking around on stage, and it seemed like forever. I mean, it seemed when that kind of thing happens, things slow down and you feel like, oh, this is going on forever. It's really only like, 15 seconds, but you feel like it's like hours almost, like, where's that mic? And everybody's watching you.
Oh, I know what you mean. I've had nights in comedy where like none of my jokes that always work weren't working. In New Zealand, I was getting paid at this famous comedy club there called the Classic. And when you're getting paid to do comedy, you have to be funny. And there was like 300 people in the audience. First joke didn't work. And I was like, okay. Try the second joke. Didn't work. I'm like, oh no. And I realized there was like a bit of a culture barrier. And maybe they weren't just understanding my type of humor or maybe even my accent. Not really sure. But I started to panic. I tried to do some crowd work. That didn't work. So then I just kind of walked upstairs like, and then I just called the MC to come and take over for me. But that literally, it probably like went on for maybe 5 minutes. I thought I was on there for an hour.
Right.
It was.
Yeah. I know that I can sympathize with you for sure. Oh man, that's comedians, people who choose to be comedians, and that is like their entire life, and that's their career. I don't know how they do it.
You gotta absolutely love it. And I ultimately found that I loved acting more, and that's when I got back into acting. And ended up working out.
Yeah. So your first role was on Travelers, with Eric Cormack. Is that correct?
Yeah, sort of. Okay, so like my first, like very first original role, I did a one-liner on a thing called Untold Stories from the ER, which is more like a docu-series. I wouldn't really consider it like my first role. It was kind of like filming like a student film when it's walking around with handy cams and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, my first like actual show was on Travelers. And I was playing like an assassin who had like they all had their tongues removed, so I didn't say anything. But yeah, they had me drive this giant Suburban it was my first job, so I'm already nervous. And all the stars are there from the show, and I'm just trying to like be quiet and fit in. And then so the first day he tells me, he's like, here's what you need to do. You got to drive this big Suburban around a corner. You've got to be at this stop sign at this time. Then you've got to pull in and you've got to come in on an angle. Then you've got to pick her up. I forget the name of the actress, but I had to pick her up and put her into the Suburban, then get back in the truck and drive away. And I had to hit these angles perfectly for them to get the shot that they wanted. And I did it. First try.
Wow. I was going to say, talk about pressure.
Oh my God, I was so nervous. I was like just white knuckling it. It just looked like I was a really intense character, so it kind of worked. But really, I was just like, please don't get fired, please don't get fired, please don't get fired.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, I did it in like one take.
Oh wow, that's well, hey, great. That's great. You operated well under pressure then. I don't know if I would have. I have a feeling that would have probably been a struggle for me, because driving is not always like my huge strength.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. And doing something like that, being told I have to get it this or that. Anyway, well, that's great that went so well for you. I'm glad.
Thanks. Well, after that, I had to drive around because we were doing a scene in the car. And usually you don't drive, they pull you. But for this, I was driving while we're doing a scene with half the crew laying down in the trunk with a camera pointed at my face and the lead actress's face. And we're doing the scene while I'm literally driving around. My first acting role ever. I was like, are you sure you guys want to do this?
Oh my goodness. Right. Oh, wow.
We made it.
Yeah, exactly.
Eric McCormick is still alive today.
There you go. Exactly. He still is alive. And oh, wow. So I know that when we had talked, we spent some time talking about, Hallmark, Lifetime, Up, those different Christmas movies that you were a part of, and Haley Dean Mystery, and that you were not familiar with Hallmark when you first started working with Hallmark, from what I remember. Is that right?
No, I knew Hallmark existed, and I knew they do a ton of films and shows. I wasn't familiar with what the shows were or the people that worked in it. I wasn't aware of the huge world that encompasses it and all the fans and everything. And yeah, like when I got onto Haley Dean Mysteries, it was wild. It was super cool. It was a whole world I got introduced that I knew nothing about. And when I played that role of Brad Stenson in the Haley Dean Mysteries, I actually auditioned for that role 6 months before I got it.
Wow.
6 months. I auditioned for the director, Michael Robinson, And the role was written kind of different. They were meeting up in college and doing kind of a backstory thing. And then 6 months later, I get a phone call and they're like, my agent's like, hey, listen, you booked Haley Dean Mysteries. I'm like, sorry, which one? And I'm like, I had to go through my stuff. I'm looking like, I didn't even audition for this thing. And she's like, yeah, you did. It was ages ago. They rewrote the part. And now you've got like a character arc in the series. It's like, yay.
Oh my.
It was cool. I was really stoked. And yeah, there was a ton of lines, a ton of work. In the episode, I think it was episode 6, Will to Kill, where they kind of try to make it look like I'm the killer when it's not, end up being Chad Lowe.
Yep.
Not to throw it up, I'm sure everybody's seen it by now. But yeah, I had to do like 5 scenes in one day on that show, which was, and I'm talking like pages and pages. I was literally at one point finishing filming a scene with Kelly and Giacomo, running to the trailer, getting changed while they're switching the camera around. And I had to do a completely different scene where I'm talking to Kelly on the phone, but it was actually ended up being like the first AD I was talking to was Kelly.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember, and of course, I'm a huge fan of the mystery series. You know, I'm sad that Haley Dean is no more. That, you know, I'm sad about that. But I definitely remember that particular one. I remember your character quite well because yeah, we all kind of thought, oh, he's a bad guy. Oh, he's the one. He did it. But I remember that. Wow. Well, so you have that, and I know there's some, and then of course you've done as many Christmas movies for various networks. Now this could put you on the spot. Is there a Christmas movie that stands out to you? Not that it has to be your favorite, but one that really stands out to you as a special memory, special moment on set?
Well, I really like working on Mingle All the Way because the cast is really cool. It was a lot of fun being there all the time. And I was working with Brant Doherty and Ava Grace Cooper and April Palick, and they were all so fun to hang out with. And it was like a little family we had. And I met Jen Lilly, I only talked to her for a little bit, but she was really cool. So yeah, it was just like a lot of fun. Like, and it was one of the longer times I was on set. I think I was there for like 2 weeks or something. And it was like a lot of downtime and just chatting and talking about everybody's journey and experiences and Hallmark and other things. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a really cool experience. One of my favorite ones for sure.
Yeah. And actually that's a movie that there's so many Christmas movies out there, but Mingle All the Way is memorable to me because it has a very different kind of story, and it was just lots of fun. It was something that was a little bit, it was still Hallmark, but it was a little bit out of the box. And that's what and had a really great ensemble cast. Like you're saying, it was a nice cast, and the characters were developed well. So it's like, I can remember that movie well. You know, sometimes if I hear a movie title, I'll be like, okay, who was in that and what was the storyline? But I remember, I just being quite honest, not.
Well, how many Hallmark Christmas movies are there? Can you memorize all of them?
No. I mean, there are times I'll be like, have I seen that one? Do I remember that one? And I have to look it up. But that one I remember. So that's cool. Yeah. That was a fantastic cast. That was one that I think that I don't think it's probably possible now, but it would have been really cool if Hallmark could have done a sequel to that one because it just was so much fun. I mean, who knows? Now, maybe in the future. Who knows? I mean,
it did really well. So yeah.
I remember that one. It was fun. I remember being completely entertained from start to finish. And it's nice to know that you had such a memorable experience on there. So
yeah, honestly, and to be quite honest, I don't think I've ever had a bad experience on a Hallmark set. When I was on Travelers, that was one of my first jobs. I felt like I was kind of being pushed around and used as like a prop a little bit. But like Hallmark, everyone from the time I even go for a fitting, everyone's so nice. Like when I was doing a summer romance, it was the first time I met Erin Krakow because we had to go to do wardrobe on the same day, and I wasn't expecting her to be there. I didn't know who she was at the time. She came up, she's like, "Hi, I'm Erin." I'm like, "I'm Jesse." And she's like, "I play Sam." I'm like, "Oh, hi, hey, how you doing?" And then she gave me her sushi. I was hungry and she'd had enough. She gave me her sushi, and it was amazing.
Oh, that's sweet. That sounds like an Erin Krakow thing to do. Yeah, because she's so She's such an incredible professional, and she always goes out of her way to make everybody on set feel at home and welcome. And so that's good to hear. That's
When
really
we finished doing A Summer Romance, she came over and gave every single person that was there a hug
yeah,
because it was the last day of shooting. Every single person.
yeah.
It was wow. It was a lesson on how to be a number one on set.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I would agree. She
Well,
everything.
that's rare. Usually when you finish, like a lot of the times, stars kind of they go do their thing. And it's over and you might have a handshake, hey, nice working with you. But she like literally made a point to come over and say something nice to every single person. And I thought that was really special.
That's sweet. That's nice to hear. That just makes me think even more of Erin than I already did. So that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. So let's talk about more current things now, because I know that you have some. You. It was interesting. I was going back and looking at our interview, and I had asked you about, if you were going to ever be involved in writing or directing or producing or something like that. It was interesting, and you said that might be something in the future that you do. But I believe you have like is it a short film that you have that you've been?
Well, I got a couple things going. Like right now, I've got a short film that was just at the New Hampshire Film Festival called Smoke Eater. It's a really great short, and the cool thing about the New Hampshire Film Festival is it's a qualifier for the Oscars for short films.
Oh, awesome! I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, so I went to go support, and it was cool, and to see a bunch of other films and stuff, and yeah, it was really special, and I enjoyed being a part of that. It's basically the short film. You're following the day in the life of a female firefighter back in 1981, and she brings her daughter to work with her. And I play Kurt, who's a male firefighter, and he's kind of like a guy's guy. But then you find out he ends up not being as good of a guy as you expected.
Oh.
So, but it's really cool how it opens people's eyes to issues that women deal with in the workplace, especially back in the time in 1981, but even still today. And it was great to film. It was a good script, great actors, and it was nice. And the other thing I got going on is a pilot called Plains of Snow. We finished filming that about 2 years ago. And for 2 years, because of the pandemic, they've been having to do all the CGI and color effects and all the editing and everything. And then they finally just premiered it in Vancouver a few weeks ago. And they're in the process of selling it right now. So hopefully that gets done, it gets made, and I got to work with some amazing actors and producers and directors who were parts of things like Van Helsing, Once Upon a Time, The 100, all the CW shows. I got to work with Alex Ponovic and Chad Rook, who I've always been a fan of for like a long time, and it was neat to see like two guys with so much experience, like go toe to toe on screen. It was great.
Oh, that
front row seat for it.
There you go. Wow. Well, that's amazing. Well, that's actually exciting. I know I was reading about that pilot, and I was reading about your short film. So I hope to see more from that. I hope good luck on maybe the Oscars will take a look at that short. That would be awesome.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. There's a lot of great films, so you do what you can, you put the work out there, and then you just let the world do what it's going to do.
That's right. And I know you have a lot of voiceover stuff. I mean, what is it? You've had like over 500 voiceover.
I've done a lot of voiceover commercials. So, and I've got Backroad Truckers, which is on Hulu and History Channel. It's about Canadian truckers delivering goods and services from like one side of like the back roads of Canada to like another side, going through like treacherous terrain and snow and mudslides and all kinds of things. And I narrate the show, and that's a lot of fun to do. We have a lot of fun recording that. So we just finished doing the second season, and that will be premiering on Hulu and History in 2023 sometime.
Oh, hey, awesome. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to look that one up, because that sounds. I kind of like shows like that. I like. I don't know.
If you like funny Canadian accents, that's a show for you. However, disclaimer: they do swear a lot.
Okay.
They have literally trucker mouths. Well, sometimes it's hard for me to even record. I have to put it on silent because I can't talk while they're just going. I'm like, oh my God. And they're very creative with their swear words. Very creative.
Okay. Well, I can usually deal with that. That's not a deal breaker. It used to be, It used to be like I would avoid all those things, but I've come a long ways. Actually, it's my young adult daughter that's gotten me to watch things. Kind of funny that she's gotten me to watch some of these things. Peaky Blinders. I don't know. Are you familiar?
Oh, whoa, okay.
There you go. So yeah.
Great show. It's very.
Yep. Yeah.
It's intense.
Yeah, she actually got me. I was not too sure about that show at first, but she got me hooked on it. And so we watched that together. We have one more season to go. But we've been watching it. So the language thing I've kind of gotten over.
With that show, you have to.
How true. Now, are you doing any writing, directing, anything like that?
I'm not. I'd like to. I think I'm going to try and, start getting my skills together for writing, directing, producing. That kind of thing's like a long journey. I think it usually starts with, making some shorts, making a lot of mistakes, taking a lot of money and just throwing it out the window and then, developing your skills that way. I mean, the way I look at it is like this. When I got into voiceover, I had no idea how to do it at first. I just started doing it. Literally, I just started trying to do as many auditions as I could. And within 6 months, I was spending like 3-4 hours a day at first, and then all day, every day for the first 6 months, learning how to do it well. And it completely changed everything. Like I had a career in 6 months just from making mistakes and trying to do it all day, every day. So I assume that directing, writing, producing, pretty much anything in life, if you just throw yourself in and you're working at it all the time and trying to grow, it'll work out. So,
well, you sound like you're definitely not afraid to jump in and try things. I mean, that's
we got one life. Do the things you want to do. Follow your dreams, right?
Exactly.
The clock's ticking.
That's true. I agree with you on that. So, all right. Well, I'm certain that I have some people in my audience who would like to ask some questions.
All right.
I wanted to start with your voice acting because that was my first question was how did you start? Did someone just suggest to you that this might be a good path to go?
It was something that was actually always in the back of my mind. I wanted to do it for a long time, but in voiceover, there used to be a barrier. Like you had to have representation, you had to have an agent. In order to do that, you had to have been good at it. But if you've never done work, it was kind of a catch-22 sort of thing. But with the advancements in internet and home studios came a whole new revolution that completely disrupted the industry. Now people were being able to do it from home instead of in the studio. And they're able to do it direct with client, which eliminated agents. So the entry for me to get in was now accessible. So all I really needed was an internet connection, a microphone, a stand, a place to record in, and then I could get started. And I learned all of that off of YouTube. I just decided I wanted to do it. I wanted to figure it out, and I did. And just watched a ton of YouTube videos on how to do it, and just started throwing myself in and auditioning for every single job I could find, and then just worked it out that way. Yeah.
Wow. I usually start by saying I'm not from your world or Ruth's world. I'm looking in on your world. And so I'm always curious on how it goes together. How did you, the ins and outs of it? It says, how did you get your first job?
I got my first job. Okay. So when I first got started, there's a website, a freelancer website called Fiverr. What I did was I started doing jobs for $5 on Fiverr, where I would do a ridiculous amount of words, like 1,000, 2,000 words, which is something I would not do now. Also, the union would not allow it, of course. But at the time, I knew I wanted to learn how to work with a client. I wanted to learn how to cut a voiceover, how to do editing. The easiest way for me to do that was to do micro jobs. So I started doing all these little micro jobs on Fiverr, and it kind of snowballed. And I started, booking like hundreds of jobs just on Fiverr. I don't necessarily count those towards my membership, my resume. And then from there, I went on to some online castings, and then started booking work for my agents, and then got into Backroad Truckers, and the rest is history. It all started with just tiny little jobs. Yeah.
But I this morning turned on Backroad Truckers so I could hear your voice. I watched several episodes. You kind of get hooked in on it once you get started.
Yeah.
how are these fools doing this? I mean, it just is like, but my question is how did you get that job?
So I was, I had, okay, so I guess it kind of starts back at, there's a place in Vancouver called On the Mic. It's a voiceover training place. I didn't start getting training there. I started getting training when I started getting legit jobs and I knew I needed to improve my skills. And one of the owners of that place his name's Michael Dangerfield. He's an amazing voiceover artist. And he was looking for a personal assistant. So I volunteered to be his personal assistant so I could learn how to do what he does. Anyway, there was an audition that came around for a show done by the same people at Backroad Truckers, but it was before that. It's called Rust Valley Restorers. And I auditioned for it, and I got Michael to help me a little bit with the coaching, but I didn't know he was auditioning for it as well. And it came down to the two of us, and he ended up getting a job. And when he found out, he called me to let me know because he wanted me to hear from him first. But he also wanted to, congratulate me on getting that far in, I think it was my second year of doing voiceover. He was saying, like, listen, with your little limited experience, you beat out everybody across Canada except for me. He's like, give yourself a pat on the back. Like, that's impressive. And then the next time they had a show, they actually sent it to my agent and said, we want Jesse to audition this. And they sent, because I worked so hard on the original audition, they sent their phone numbers, emails, if I had any questions. I didn't. And I wanted it. So I worked so hard on it. And it was also, they were looking for a voice that had my qualities. So I was kind of lucky that way. So I sent in the audition. They asked me to do the whole first episode script. That took me a while. I had to voice the whole thing from home. And then they called me in for a third audition where I had to go into the studio and prove that I could actually do this while I was being directed. And I'd never done that before. And you had to they play a screen of what's happening in the show, and they give you a few beeps. And at the third beep, you read what's on the screen in time with what's happening on the video. So because I was reading so much voiceover copy in the days and auditioning for everything, I was getting really good at thinking while speaking at the same time. So if I hadn't been working so hard at voiceover, I think I would have caved at that audition because it's difficult to do. But I aced it. And at the end, they said, okay, listen, you got the job before I even left the place. So
that I was going to ask you that is how's it work? Because I'm looking in, and if you watch the show and the voice just comes right in the right perfect spots. And so you're seeing a video then, and you're reading and doing it that way.
Yeah, I am. And the original promo of that, like when you turn on the episode and it's like, this week on Backroad Trucker, that was my callback audition. They used it.
Oh,
yeah, that was they recorded it while I was doing it, and they ended up using that for the show. That's the first thing I ever recorded for it. And yeah, so but after they told me that I was going to get the job, then I had to go back and wait for my agent to call, and then they had to go back and forth with there was so much more involved that it wasn't. I was getting kind of nervous because it wasn't totally secure because the agent throws numbers, the company throws numbers, they figure out if they're going to do it. Then they ask you, and it's like another 2 weeks of negotiations went by, and it was like, oh my God. And then finally got secure, and I got to celebrate. It was like my first real big gig in voiceover.
And I don't think you can go bad with History Channel. I mean, that's really
no, it's huge on my resume, and
that is really good.
Yeah.
So, did you ever get to meet any of the characters?
I not in person, but Angela, me and her talk on Instagram quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll because they'll film it, and then I get to go see once it's edited, and I'll sneak them pictures and videos. I'm not really supposed to do it, but I do it of them on screen and stuff, so they can show their parents and stuff, put it on their social media.
Okay. What other voice overall that you did that really stands out that you're I should look for or watch for? Or is there something you can suggest to keep an eye out for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a lot of commercials. So the thing about commercials is they play for a limited amount of time, and then they kind of disappear. I've worked a lot with Amazon, Orange Theory, Saks, Honda. It's a bunch of different companies, but it's hard to go find it because they played on streaming services and it comes around. But right now, one thing I'm trying, I got signed by a really good agency here in America. I'm from Canada, but I live in New York now. They're called Atlas Talents, and they're throwing me everything under the sun: video games, commercials, animation, a bunch of shows I have to sign NDAs for, but I can't really say. But hopefully soon, yeah, we'll be getting into the market where you can actually look me up for other things other than like commercials and TV narration. Because video games and animation, that is my next mountain to climb. I really, really, really want to get in that. And I'm working with some good coaches to try and make sure that I get into that.
You're really lucky that you have that to fall back on, because a lot of actors really struggle and the downtimes when they don't get a part, or it takes a long time in between. And
Yeah.
you have this as a perfect background that you can, rely on it. And
Yeah, I thought about that actually. It's one of the things that drove me to get into it, because I'd been, aside from acting and comedy, I've been working as a nightclub manager for a very, very, very long time. And that business and that life, it takes a toll on you. And it's a really hard life to, like, the people you're around, the late nights, people drinking all the time around you. And I knew it was something I couldn't sustain for much longer. I'm 44 now, and I was like, this is when I'm in my mid to late 30s at the time that I got into voiceover. And I saw it as something that I could fall back on in between jobs. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this work. And that was the one thing that always pushed me, is that I didn't really have a choice, because I saw how a lot of my friends live, actors that work quite a bit, but sometimes you can have it, no matter how much you work, you can have a year or sometimes two between like a good job. And I knew I didn't want to live like that. So I needed something that was in the acting world that I would be able to get an income from regularly. And it just so happened that, like, doing voiceover, it was something that I really excelled at. I don't think I've ever picked up anything that quick in my life. I suspect it had a little bit to do with that I've been a comedian for 10 years. So I learned how to talk on a microphone and engage people. But when you're doing comedy, you're writing those jokes down and you're making them sound like they come off the top of your head. And that's essentially what doing commercial voiceover is. You're taking copy that you didn't write and you're trying to make it sound like it's coming off the top of your head, not doing a commercial spot. So I'd already been doing that for a decade. So I think that really got me a bit of a head start in the voiceover.
Was your family supportive? I mean, was this when you went to high school? Was this what you wanted to do? Were they like going crazy? Like, how are you going to pay for your life? And
My family was very supportive. Well, I always kind of did what I want. I've been kind of a rebel my entire life. So they just knew that I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. I wanted to be an actor since I was very, very young. I grew up quite poor, so there wasn't an option to be able to study or get into it. And I also lived in towns on Vancouver Island in Canada way before streaming. There was very few shows that were being filmed anywhere, especially in Vancouver. I think that Vancouver changed and started getting more productions when the X-Files came around, and the X-Files hit big. And still, when I first moved to Vancouver in the early 2000s, there still wasn't a lot. Like, I think there was like maybe like 5 to 8 shows that were being filmed. And now there's like, the countless. Like, I think there's like some like 30 or 40 productions going on at any given time, maybe more.
When you first start out, you take any job you can get in acting, like you want to put your face out there, whatever. What is the craziest job you took?
In acting or voiceover?
In acting.
In acting, the craziest job I took. Oh, okay. So this is kind of along the lines. When I first started getting into it, I had this agent, and she'd randomly send me out for modeling gigs, which I wasn't super comfortable with. But she sent me out to one, which was an ear modeling gig. So I go into this ear modeling gig, and this guy like takes a picture of my ear, and I find out I get the job. So it's like I go in, and there's all these executives while I'm doing this job, and the photographer, and they're all staring at my ears, trying to figure out which one they want to use. Then it's like 8 people, maybe 8 or 9, and they're all unanimously at one time. They point to my right ear, and they're like, "That one." I'm like, "What's wrong with my left ear?" So anyway, it was a weird gig, and they paid me a bunch of money to take pictures of my ear and use it for the company's logo.
That's okay. That's great. I also love watching all the way to the end of the movies. I watch the credits of like, what, and you have a lot of them. You were Frank and you were Mike and you were Sheriff Lonnie and Martin and Officer Brad and whatever. But in Time Traveler, you were credited as the tall driver.
Tall driver. Yeah.
The tall driver.
That was the audition was that too. It was tall driver. So like every single one of those guys that were like, I forget the character's name. That season, there was like the bad guy, and he had all these like people in suits that would follow him around, and all their tongues removed, so if they get caught, they couldn't say anything. It was Traveler number 1, the first traveler to ever travel. Anyway, I was one of his henchmen, and all of his henchmen were named Tall something. So like Tall Driver, or Tall Heavy, or Tall Henchman. Like every single one that had a tall name. So I was Tall Driver. But it was also a very, very small role, so I expected to be like that.
I like crazy titles, so that I loved that. So. In Haley Dean, you did 2 episodes. Did you get to meet Nancy Grace?
I didn't. She was not there.
Okay, because I know she had a part to play with the writing of that script or something.
Yeah, she was. I'd heard that she was in town for some of the filming and some of the episodes, but not when I was there.
Yeah. Okay. When you audition, you said before that it took 6 months before you found out that. What is the average time? Like if you're auditioning for a part, when do you know if you got it or not? Do they notify you right away, or do they not notify you, or you just sit there and wonder?
It depends. Like it can be really, really quick. Usually like with TV, like you'll find out pretty quickly. 6 months is excessive. That means that, they just really liked what I did, and they wanted to kind of figure out how they were going to fit me in, because their original idea didn't really work, I guess. But usually you'll hear something within a few days. Or now one thing they like to do that's pretty popular is they'll pin you so that your agent will know not to book you out on those days. Like you might get the job. So that means it's down between you and like maybe 4 people. And then you get a hold, and it's between you and one person. And then you either hear that you get it or you hear nothing.
You go crazy at that time when you're getting closer to those people. What keeps you busy? How do you distract your mind?
You try not to think about it, because so often you don't hear it. But just by sheer numbers, especially now when you're doing self-tapes. Like before, they would call like maybe 10, 12 people in the room tops for one role. Now, because of self-tapes, like I'm hearing that they're looking at upwards of like 60, 70 people for a role just off the tapes. So just because of the odds, like you would assume if most people are good, which they should be if they're going for a good role, the odds are just, they're against you. So you just have to keep doing the best you can. Like I was training with Terry Knickerbocker, who's Sam Rockwell's acting coach, and Daniel Craig, and he's worked with all these stars and celebrities. And he tells a story about how he was coaching Sam Rockwell for an audition, and he worked so hard on it and did such a good job that director didn't ultimately give Sam Rockwell the role because he didn't think he was right for it. But it was like 6 years later, he called Sam and said, "I finally figured it out. I loved your audition so much. I'm writing a movie for you." And it was called Moon. And where Sam had to play like 4 or 5 different versions of himself. Ended up getting nominated for an Oscar for it. So I guess the point I'm trying to get across is that each audition is an opportunity to not just book that job, but book another job.
Yeah.
You just want to you want to be able to represent yourself as best you can, regardless of whether the odds are in your favor or not.
Yeah. You had a 3-minute short. I love shorts. I have a grandson who is dating a girl in University of Miami, and she's going for filming. And so she participates in a lot of shorts and, back up people and stuff like that. But in the Order of the Sword was an action film about a bloody long sword duel. You played the challenger. Did you have any know-how of how to work that sword, or did someone come in and teach you? They did. So Plains of Snow, this pilot that I worked on, it's a fantasy pilot. It's kind of like a cross between like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, only grittier. And this, I can't say too much about it yet, but
basically it's in the fantasy world. So I played a character named Dryak who knows how to use a sword and a bow and arrow. So before I went to go do that, I went and trained at a sword fighting academy in Vancouver. So when I was just kind of looking through the directories and Actors Access about auditions because, I just want to stay in shape and work as much as I can. I'm always interested in collaborating with more people. There was a student film. That's what it was. It was a student film. And they were looking for anybody with sword fighting experience. And I was literally training with a sword right then. And I was like, I'm going to go in for this. And the audition was like, it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. They had me read and they were like, okay, great. So then they had the sword and they're like, what we need you to do, because we have to prove that you know how to use the sword for liabilities and all that. Otherwise we won't get a license to be able to film this. They had a water bottle and they put it on top of like this stand. And I had to take the sword and swing it at the water bottle and stop and touch the water bottle without knocking the water bottle off the stand, which is harder than you think. I was like, okay, no problem. And it took me about 3 tries, but I did it. And then they were like, yeah. And then he wanted to see me swing around the sword and do some moves. So when you're in the sword fighting academy, they actually teach you kind of like, in karate, they call them katas, where like you do a bunch of moves and stuff that are in a sequence to work on that craft. So they have the similar things in craft of sword fighting as well. So I knew how to move from like one stance to the next, and like how you're supposed to do it. So then I played some music and just went into the zone and started doing it. And they were like, "Okay, hired."
That's great. Yeah. Well, it looked really cool. So I hope we get to see it. You perform in different kinds of films. Do you have a preference? Like you were in mystery, sci-fi, rom-com. Do you prefer one over the other?
I don't know if I do. I definitely like prefer certain style of characters. I think like ones that are interesting, that are a little bit off the beaten path. It's more fun to get into, and it's when the character's least like me. Like I'm an energetic person, I'm a little goofy at times and all that. So when I get to play someone that's kind of like maybe like a badass, that's fun for me. Like for instance, like I think my favorite character that I ever played in any of the Hallmarks was Brad Stenson, because it was so multi-dimensional and it was so unclear, like if he was a good guy, if he was a bad guy, and especially from the start. When I did the first episode with him in it, it was episode 5. And it was, I just show up at the end, and I'm a college friend of Haley's and a friend of Chad Lowe's as well. And it's just a scene where I'm there with my wife, and we're all having nachos, watching a baseball game, and just chatting and all that. And it's just fun, happy scene. And then when I got the script for the next episode, and they're like, I'm in a room where I'm arrested, I'm being questioned and all this. I'm like, this is great.
Oh, nice.
I had a lot of fun. So yeah.
And then my last question, what I like to end with, is if you had a chance to be in a old classic movie, what movie would you choose, or what character?
Okay, well, it would never happen, but I'd love to be in The Godfather. Oh my God.
Oh, okay.
They would never cast me. They're like, this goofy guy.
You never know.
No one's never going to take him serious as a gangster. I can do it. No, I don't know, probably not.
You could do it. So, well, I thank you so much for answering all my questions.
No problem. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paula's pretty good. You can tell she's done her homework, and she's good. All right. So thank you, Paula. Timmy, Bettina, do either of you have a question? I figured Timmy probably would. Okay. All right.
Yes, although I have to confess, I didn't do my homework, so it's going to be more general questions.
How's the weather in New York? Ask me that. It's all good.
No, I'm actually curious. Having been a comedian, do you still use or rely on humor to get you through sticky, uncomfortable, stressful situations?
100%. 100%. Maybe too much, to be honest. Like I think it was ever since I was like just a little kid, my uncles were always joking around, and my dad's side of the family, they're always, ribbing each other and making fun of each other. And comedy's been a part of my life, my entire life. And especially to deal with our awkward circumstances. So I think maybe I throw jokes a little bit too much.
That's good. I like that. How did you handle hecklers? Did you come across hecklers during your stand-up shows?
Yeah, it depends. Every situation is different. You know what I mean? I think sort of the rule of thumb is, first of all, just ignore it, because sometimes it's just somebody that's drunk that you can't really talk to anyway. So you ignore it at first. If they keep doing it, you have to address it. You let them talk, and usually it's not something very witty. So you just say, "Wow, comedy's hard, huh?" And then the whole audience laughs at them, and it's over. Every now and then, it's somebody that's funnier than you, and that sucks. But yeah, it's always case by case. There's no like standard way to handle a heckler. Other than that, you don't want to engage them in an aggressive way. It's always got to be fun and happy. As soon as the audience thinks that you're sweating up there or you're angry, it just changes the environment. It's basically like you're the MC of the night. You know, it's you're throwing the party. If the person throwing the party gets upset, it's gonna be an awkward party. You know. So I just look at it that way. I always think that no matter what, the person that's heckling generally doesn't have bad intentions. They're just excited that you're up there, and they want to be a part of the show. You know, hey, I'm here too, and you acknowledge them, and they usually stop.
Sounds good. So, what's your favorite joke? Do you have one?
My favorite joke of mine, or like somebody else's? I used to do this one joke. I don't know if it's funny anymore, but it used to get a laugh 100% of the time, no matter where I was in the world. Which was basically like, I was like, okay, so I'm from Canada, and being from Canada, people always assume that everybody in Canada speaks French, which is of course not the case. But did you know that when Lil Wayne, the gangster rapper, performs in Canada, we introduce him to the stage as Le Petit Wayne? That's the joke. Hey!
Learn something new every day.
You do.
So, what do you do for fun?
Well, in New York City, New York's kind of a cool place. Not a lot of people.
I used to live there. I lived in the suburbs in Westchester County for 5 years.
Yeah. What did you think of it?
I miss it.
Yeah. I like it here. There's a lot of opportunity. It's really cool here. What I do for fun, usually go see movies, go to plays, things like that. Go to Broadway. Yeah.
I love Broadway shows. I had one more question. If you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would those words be?
Fun, adventurous, and determined.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah, no, to me, those were great questions. Thank you so much. Oh, I love it when I bring on my audience members because they ask questions I hadn't thought of asking. And so then I end up learning stuff. So it's so much fun. I love it. And do this. But Tina, did you have a question? Did you want to come on?
Right. Maybe one good guy or bad guy. What do you prefer to play?
Oh, bad guy, 100%.
Yeah, definitely. Wow.
That's funny. Most of actors say that.
Because they're written more interesting. You know, they're multidimensional, and there's reasons. There's more stuff to dig into. That's why.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bettina. Yeah, I and although I don't really act, I've done some acting, and if I had a choice, I would play a bad guy too. So I'm right there with you. It's like I don't want to play somebody who's nice and just.
I would love to see you as a bad girl.
I was gonna say that would be so going out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I'd like to see that too. I think that'd be an interesting. Yeah.
That'd be fun, yeah. Well, who knows? Who knows what the future holds? So, well. Well, Jesse, this has been absolutely fantastic. I have loved getting to chat with you. So thank you so much for sharing. I mean, we have so many things that we can look up for the past, and then all these things happening for you coming up, and so I'm grateful that we have this connection today. It's fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm grateful for being on here and getting to finally chat with you in person.
That's right.
Virtually.
That's right. Exactly. So if you guys want to unmute and express your appreciation to Jesse, feel free.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. It was so nice to get to know you a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was fun. Thank you.
I enjoyed it also, and I really enjoyed your ice show, your driver show. I hope you get season 3. I'm looking forward to season 2.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, thank you to everybody for being here, and have a great rest of your week.
Bye.
Likewise.
Bye. Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Well, I tell you, I honestly cannot thank Jesse and his entire team so much for making this marvelous episode happen. Jesse was so much fun, so authentic. He didn't hold anything back. You got to know who he really was, and who you saw, who you see, who you hear. That's Jesse Arthur Carroll. And I have this feeling that we're going to see great things from him. I mean, as in big things. We're already seeing amazing things, but there are going to be big things on the horizon, and I can hardly wait to see that for him. So I wish him all the best. And please check out all of his links in the description for this episode. All his links, you can follow him and keep up with what he's doing as he just explodes on the scene, because I know that's happening for him. Whatever he chooses to do, he's going to be successful. I have no doubt. For those of you who are listening, watching, if you're on Apple Podcasts, please like, subscribe, rate, review. Not like, but you know what I mean. If you're on YouTube, you're going to like it. Please, I appreciate that when you do that. If you subscribe, thumbs up. I really appreciate all of your support. Subscribe to the email, join the Facebook group. I mean, how amazing is this wonderful, wonderful virtual audience? You guys, that's all you. You guys make this podcast what it is. So thank you so much for your support. From my heart to yours, may God bless all of you this holiday season. Bye for now.